Hello my fellow book lovers, and welcome to another book recommendations video. So we're gearing up into the fall time, so I figured I'd give you some of my fall recommendations for this year, because to believe it or not, last year I really hadn't had any experience with reading fall books. This year will be like my first real experience. I think really letting myself read fall themed books and stuff like that, or things that remind me of fall. So to be quite honest, I don't have too many recommendations to give you, because in the grand scheme of things, when I think about it, I'm like, I haven't read that many books. And I'm confused because I'm like, how have I not read that many books? But when I think about it, because this year, about to pass my reading goal, which was 80 books for the year, and I'm like, I've already read almost 80 books. So how in my lifetime have I not read that many? I don't know. I guess I'm just comparing myself to other booktubers and other bookstagrammers and stuff who read literally all the time. Anyways, I'm gonna stop rambling so we can kind of get into it. Limited myself for each genre to only 5 books to recommend per genre. Now, not even every single genre that I have sitting in front of me has 5 books in it that I'm recommending. So we have fantasy, romance, young adult, and mystery thrillers. Let's start with the ones I'm most excited about, and honestly the fantasies are probably kind of a given within this type of video. I mean, fantasies are always a fall winter type of read, so obviously I'm probably going to be recommending you the most popular ones because they're the books everybody's going to recommend. These are all books that I have personally read and that I personally like and recommend to people. If there is a series that you're mad that it's not on here, it's because I haven't read it, or if I did read it, I just didn't like it. But anyways, let's get right into it. First of all, let's go into our fantasy genre. So the first book, which is not a book I physically actually have, Heartless Hunter. I actually only gave about a 3.75 stars, but I really liked it. I think the story is very much I don't know, it really does give that fall cozy feeling. It is an enemies to lovers fantasy. It also takes place, okay, I don't want to say takes place, but the world reminds me of Bridgerton era. Okay, so if you've seen Bridgerton and you kind of know what the era is, when there's a lot of balls, there's courting. If you guys don't know what this book is about, if you haven't read it or haven't even heard of it, this book is going to be a duology about a young girl who is hiding undercover because she's a witch. Love interest is the guy who is a witch hunter, and basically they want to abolish all witches within this world. They want to get rid of them all. They think they have too much power and too much influence over people. She is hiding and trying to take down basically everything that people have to do with people who hunt witches. This is a young adult fantasy read. It's super fun. I really did enjoy myself while reading it. I feel the only reason I rated it so low was because the time that I had read it, I had actually read this right after I read Powerless. Well, not right after, but shortly after I had read Powerless. And I personally wasn't a big fan of Powerless, and this book reminded me a lot of it, if that makes sense. But if I didn't read Powerless first, I think I would have ate this up and it probably would have been a 5 stars or close to 5 stars. So that's why I'm kind of recommending it, because I think if I read it at a different time, I would have loved it way more than I actually did and not have compared it to another book. Okay, next up we have the Cruel Prince trilogy. This first fantasy trilogy or fantasy series that I had ever read, and it does not disappoint. I know some people they don't love the fact that it's marketed as enemies to lovers, but the romance doesn't happen in the first book, which is kind of true. But with everything that's going on in the book and all the politics and the world building, you don't really miss the romance, because there is a lot of that tension, and literally they're literal enemies. Okay, so there's a lot of that tension and a lot of that fighting and bantering going back and forth that you don't really miss the romance that's in it, because for one, it is coming, and for two, there's just so much going on that is so entertaining that I don't know, personally I just didn't miss it. I just didn't miss it within this first book, and I fell in love instantly. Basically though, this book has 2 different worlds. It takes place in the Fae world as well as the human realm. You're not really ever in the human world very often, but they can go back and forth. Our main character, Jude, is actually a human. She's living amongst the Fae. Her parents were murdered, and the guy who murdered her parents ended up taking them back to live with him in this Fae world where humans are usually slaves, but they're not. They're treated as his children, and they're not necessarily the most respected, but they at least have a fair advantage in this world compared to other humans. The female main character in this book, she is such a badass. Literally, if I was to pick a book character to fight for me and literally win, it'd be her. It is astounding how amazing this girl is. So good at what she does, okay? The fantasy realm that you're in is just so fairy tale like. I just like don't know how to describe that any better than it being a fairy tale. You know what I mean? I just like think that everyone and their mom needs to read this book, or at least like give it a chance, because like once you truly like get into it and like really understand like what's going on within this world, like you just become so invested in the characters, their story, and everything that goes on, especially with Jude, because Jude is such a strong character. I feel like there's not a lot of female characters written like Jude. That's something I really, really love about this book. This was also a young adult fantasy series. Another young adult fantasy series. This is the Once Upon a Broken Heart. This again gives such good fairy tale vibes. Like literally it is fairy tale. Basically the lore is like a storybook essentially. Like within this world, all the lore is like a storybook. I absolutely love that. This series follows Evangeline Fox, and within this first book, basically she thinks the love of her life is about to get married, so she prays to the Prince of Hearts to stop the wedding. But in exchange, he asks for 3 kisses that he can use at his will, but his kisses are fatal, and it's just like basically by means to control her. And this is a trilogy. I absolutely love this trilogy. This is a 5-star series for me. You haven't read it or you don't know anything about it, like I highly recommend picking it up. Like it is just so magical, whimsical, and I just loves it. I love it. Literally when I was reading it, I was so giddy and I was so drawn in, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I cannot believe what I'm reading. And it's just so good. It just gives such like fairy tale vibes, and I absolutely love it. I highly recommend this series if you have not read it. Again, like I said, it is a young adult fantasy series. It's super fast paced, so easy to get through. The world building isn't too much, considering there is a trilogy before this. You don't have to read it, but I think like for a really like nice reading experience, especially since you'll meet some of the other characters in that previous series, it'll make a little bit more sense. But like I said, you don't need to read it. I personally didn't read it, and I didn't have any trouble following along. The only thing that I think you find out within those first 3 books that you don't know in this one, how some of the like the fates is what they're called, which is the Prince of Hearts in this book, how they became a fate and some of their backstory and lore and stuff like that, because Jax is in the first trilogy as well. So I think you find that out, but otherwise I highly recommend. Something I always say is that I'm really bad at describing books, because I know and I remember the way I feel when I'm reading them, but like when it literally comes to like telling you what a book is about, every thought leaves my brain. Next up, and this one should not come as a surprise, and that is the Acatar series. The Acatar series, like if you haven't read this series yet, what are you doing? Are you living under a rock? I'll wait. I very much enjoyed my time while reading this series. This first one, I will say, I don't want to say it's hard to get through, but it's not as good as like I feel like people hype it up. When people are hyping up Acatar, they're not meaning this first book. They're meaning the series as a whole and the books after. Because this one, like nothing happens until probably the like 65-70% mark. That's when everything starts to get to shit, you know? And that's where the entertainment starts happening in this series. So this is currently a 5-book series. Why did I say Stephanie? Sarah J. Maas has come out to say that she is currently, I think, working on another Acatar book. So this series is not complete. Literally, you can catch up with the rest of the series because I don't think that's going to come out anytime soon. I highly recommend this one. If you guys don't know, this first book is basically a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This started out, I guess, as a young adult series, but I would classify this as an adult fantasy series or even new adult fantasy series. I feel like there was a decent amount of spice in this one. But basically, Feyre kills a Fey wolf, which is not allowed. Tamlin comes to take her back to the Spring Court because she has like broken the law and stuff like that to live out the rest of her days as a prisoner, basically. So it's a fun read, fun series more likely, okay? Like I absolutely love this series. I do want to reread it eventually. I don't know when. I have so many other rereads on my list so far, and this is just like not at the top of it. So I will love to reread this. Maybe when the new book comes out, I'll like have to set aside time to be able to reread this entire series. But otherwise, yeah, I just like think that everyone should read this book, because if you're just getting into fantasy, like the world building and the fantasy elements in this one, I don't want to say are hard to grasp or even like hard to like understand in any way. There are easier fantasy books to get started with, but I do think that this is a good one to start with as well. Like if you want to start with this one, like you hear everyone talking about it and you want to read it, this one is not hard to start with. Granted, I feel like there are better ones, but this one is not hard and easy to follow along. And lastly, within our fantasy series, if you guys don't know what book I'm about to recommend, then clearly you don't know me at all, because this is my Roman Empire and I will forever talk about to the end of my days, and that is Fourth Wing. Literally, my Fourth Wing paperback special edition copy just came yesterday. So I'm so freaking excited just to even have this in my possession and hold it. Yesterday, literally when I opened it, I screamed. Like, it's so pretty. That's not what I'm here to talk about though. This is literally my Roman Empire. I will never shut up about this book, this series. I absolutely love it. Okay, Violet gets entered into the Writer's Quadrant, and basically every day of her life she's just trying to survive to the next day. This is an enemies to lovers romance. There's some shady shit that goes on that Violet's the one who has to discover it. You know, things like that go on in this book. She had always wanted to go into a different quadrant, the Scribe Quadrant, but her mother forces her into the Writer's Quadrant because her mother is the general of the entire basically freaking army of dragons. You know, she is forced to become a dragon rider. It is fly or die. Okay, if you don't make it, you're dead and there's nothing you can do. So I highly recommend. Really high stakes, like literally the entire time you're on the edge of your seat because you're fearing for Violet's life at every given moment. Okay, and there's some really great characters in here that you really like grow to love and form an attachment to. It's also funny, like some of the characters, so funny. And you feel like you get this like found family aspect, things like that. So yes, I highly, highly recommend. If you have not read this book or you're thinking about reading it, please do, because it is so worth it. This is literally, like I said, my Roman Empire. I cannot wait to reread the first and the second book when the third book comes out in January. It is already on my list. It's already happening. I already have it all planned out. Let's move on to my young adult section, okay? These books I'm actually like super into. Two of these books I actually just recently read, and then two of them I read a while ago, but I still recommend because they're actually two of my 5-star reads. Betting on You by Lynn Painter. I actually recommend all of Lynn Painter's like young adult books. She is such a fun writer, and her stuff is so easy to read. It's so quick paced. This book follows Bailey and Charlie, and they are both actually unlikely friends in a way. They kind of become unlikely friends due to the fact that both of their parents are divorced. They kind of like really connect with each other on that and confide in each other about this like thing that nobody else really kind of understands that's in their life. I really, really like that aspect of it. He is just like this easygoing, free-spirited teenage boy, and he feels like she's this like uptight, nerdy, like stick to the rules girl, and he kind of just tries to break her out of his shell and things like that and torment her a little bit. But yeah, they are just like the cutest little couple. Takes place during like the beginning of the school year, so that's why I kind of recommended it here for like the fall time. Super quick paced. I do think that it could have been a little bit shorter in the grand scheme of things. Like I said, it's just super fun, fast paced. I loved them. I thought they were super cute, okay? And if you're looking just for like a easy romance, this is it. Next up is The Inheritance Games. This is actually technically a mystery, but I put it within my young adult because it's definitely more geared towards young adult mystery than it is just mystery in general. This book, basically, there's actually 3 books within this series, and it's all great. There's actually more books coming out in this series, but this first initial trilogy is done. They're all, I think, companion series to this one. Like, it follows the characters, but not like to a T like this one. So basically the first, second, and third book all follow each other basically back to back. It's not like a new mystery every single time. They all very similar overarching plotline, which is Avery Graham's has been bequeathed basically hundreds of billions of dollars by a man that she does not know. And their family is very outraged about this, and she has no idea why. Family has no idea why. And basically the grandfather who bequeathed her all this money left them clues and riddles, and it's like this big giant mystery to figure out why he left all this money to Avery Graham's. So you're basically following that actually throughout the entire 3 books. You find out different things and different subplot storylines within each book, but either way, it's still really, really fun. I absolutely love Avery. I think she was like a really good character to lead this series. Was basically just a poor girl who, not poor, yeah, she was poor actually, I don't know what I'm saying, poor girl, you know, then all of a sudden is like this teen socialite, is like, I don't know what to do, this is not my world, my realm, and I don't even want anything to do with it. It was a really fun trilogy. I really enjoyed myself. It's super quick paced. There is like a little subplot of romance within the books, but it doesn't like overtake the books, and I also feel like it's just like a nice little element that's in there to keep you kind of going going and like fill, because if the whole thing was like mystery, 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 like trying to solve a riddle, it would just be very repetitive. It is a little bit repetitive within that sense, but it's all different enough where it doesn't feel that way when you're reading it. So I really like that aspect of it. But either way, like I said, young adult mystery, super fun read. I highly recommend it. And if you haven't read it yet, you need to put it on your TBR. This first book I think is actually on Kindle Unlimited. The other two books are not, but if you wanted to give it a shot, see if you even like it, you can. Love that for you. Next two books I have, both young adult books that will rip your heart out, okay? First one is If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. Basically this book, if you guys do not know what this is about, if you have not read it and you're deciding if you want to read it, like I said, I highly recommend you do. This was a 5-star read for me. Basically, you find out what happens in the beginning of the book, and throughout the entire thing, it's basically just you hoping that you've already been told doesn't come true. The book follows Autumn and Finney, who used to be like best friends when they were little, and then as they start high school, they grow apart and they start to have different friend groups, but kind of slowly find their way back to each other because their lives will never stop crossing. Their lives will never stop crossing paths because their mothers are best friends and next door neighbors. If He Had Been With Me, everything would have been different. It really like kind of tears your heart out because it's like that, like, do you really like think about like what could have been, or do you live with what is? You know, it really tears your heart out. It is a quick read. Like, you fly through this book, okay? Like, also, I was in tears, bawling, okay? Don't read this in public. You're gonna be bawling your eyes out. That's all I have to say about this book. I highly recommend you read it. It follows them all 4 years of high school and like different stages of their friendships and their relationships with each other and other people. So that's a really nice aspect, and seeing like how they grow as people before this like really big incident happens. The next one is The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. This is again another 5-star read of mine. I read this one last summer, I think, and I really, really loved it. This one is a hard one to read. Like, really like look up the trigger warnings of this one because it's not a secret that what happens in this book, so I will tell you because it says it right on the back. Eden is really trying to get away from the person that she used to be because she was raped by her brother's best friend, and it's a really hard like thing to kind of like grasp and think about, the fact that this happened to such a young girl. So now basically everything that used to seem like easy and simple is now just like this complexity of like, what do I do now, or like how do I like change myself, or like what do I do? And basically it shows you like the path that you would take, or the path that you could go down like after something this traumatic happening to you. This follows Eden throughout all 4 years, I think, of high school. All 4 years of high school with her dealing with this and this secret that she has, because she's never told anybody that this has happened to her. She generally becomes a shell of a person that she used to be, and she's really trying to get away from the person she was, because the person she was got assaulted, and she was like, if I don't do that and I don't let anyone take that claim over me, no one's ever going to take that away from me again or do something like that to me again. So yeah, it is kind of a hard read. I would definitely look up like a lot of trigger warnings for it. That is definitely the biggest one, I would say. I highly recommend this one if you're looking for like a deep, gut-wrenching read. Let me do my romances and I'll save my mystery thrillers for last. I feel like when you think of fall and you think of spooky season, you think of mystery thrillers, don't you? I sure do. So let's do that. I have 4 books for my romance genre. 2 of the books I don't physically have. I read them on my Kindle. And the first one is actually a series. Like I said, some of these are a part of series, but I'm just recommending this whole series because I'm trying to think like if any of them took place in the fall time, which I think the second book, which is my favorite, did, but I don't remember. First one I'm going to recommend is the Chestnut Spring series. I've recommended so many times. If you guys have not read the Chestnut Spring series, you need to. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. Like, they're cowboy romances. They're so fun and entertaining. Each book follows a different couple. My favorite book, I think, is Heartless, but my favorite man is Theo from book 4 in Reckless. But yeah, they all follow different couples. They all have different tropes. They're super, super fun and entertaining. They're so fast paced, and each one, it doesn't feel like a copy and paste of the next. It literally like follows totally different storylines. Just gives such different vibes. It never feels like you're just like within the same universe. And like all the characters like end up crossing over with each other, which is super fun, but each character gets their own story, which is so fun and I love. The next book that I read on my Kindle that I don't have, that I absolutely loved, was Out on a Limb. I absolutely fell in love with this book immediately. This book actually is a accidental pregnancy trope, but if you're gonna read an accidental pregnancy trope, make it this one because it is done so well. Hannah Bonham Young really focuses on the characters becoming friends and like establishing a relationship with each other that's not romantic for the sake of their kid, and like really like emphasizes all of that and like makes their relationship so much better and their connection and their chemistry and all that so much better throughout the entire book. I absolutely love it. It's also I don't know exactly what you would call it. She has a underdeveloped hand, which apparently the author of the book also has an underdeveloped hand. So I was like, that's so cute. You wrote yourself in a book. And then Beau, who is the main character, he has an amputated leg. Because I've never read a book with characters like that before who have like that type of disability. I just really loved seeing them portrayed in a book like that because I've never seen that before, and I just really liked the way that she did it, and I thought it was super great. I was hooked the entire time, and I absolutely loved them as a couple and their journey together as friends to lovers, basically. Next up, this is another 5-star read of mine. Actually, these two are actually 5-star reads. I didn't even realize that. I did realize that, but I kind of forgot. First one I have is When in Rome by Sarah Adams. Short and sweet, okay? Such a quick read. If you love Taylor Swift, this is for you. Amelia, our female main character, she is a famous pop star, and her car ends up breaking down in front of his house because she is trying to just get away and just so happens to break down in front of his house. And he owns a pie shop, which is so cute. It's a small town. Strangers to lovers, I wouldn't call them enemies to lovers, but he kind of like wants nothing to do with her because he knows that she's a pop star, and he's just like literally like, I'm just trying to run a business and you're just here. But I absolutely loved their connection, and I loved them as characters and this cute little story that they had. It just is so cute. Like he owns a little pie shop, and it's just like, I just want to see like what you do. Like I just want to be here. Like I love this place. Like it is so good and so cute. This is a closer romance. The thing to know about Sarah Adams though is that she writes really goofy, silly, cheesy romances, okay? And she like knocks up the extreme cheesiness where it like doesn't feel like cringy that it's so cheesy. It feels so cute and giddy because it's so cheesy. You know what I mean? She writes it to a point where she knows that it's kind of ridiculously cheesy, and I keep saying cheesy because I really want to emphasize that. She writes it to a point where I feel like she knows that this is really ridiculous and almost unrealistic, and she just plays into that so well. Other books that I've recently read are a bit cringy because they like have this unrealisticness to them that they don't play into, and they're just like, doesn't hit the same. You know what I mean? When I tell you that this is super cheesy and unrealistic, but in a good way, I mean it. Okay? This is chef's kiss, amazing, fun, flirty, great time. Last up in the romance genre, we have the 7-Year Sliit by Ashley Poston. This again was a 5-star read for me last year. This book contained magical realism, so obviously I feel like that gives very much fall vibes. Basically though, our main character was bequeathed her aunt's apartment after she passes away, so this book deals a lot with grief within the main character. The thing about this apartment that she's bequeathed is that it can slip 7 years into the past at any given time for any given reason, and you don't know why it does this, but it just does. That's a big point of like the magical realism, that it's like it's never explained, it's just something that happens. Basically she moves into this magic apartment, and then one day the apartment slips 7 years into the past, and next thing you know there's this man there that she's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm living here for the summer, who are you? Then she meets him in the present day. So yeah, it's kind of like seeing their relationship like grow and unfold. Loved this book. It was so good, okay? I just don't have anything else to say about it. I just absolutely loved it. Like just the concept of it was just so different than anything I'd ever read before. I was just like baffled. I was like, what the heck? Because it just like, it was just so good. And it like you would think that something like that wouldn't like read well or like wouldn't go over well, but it does. And it was like, it's just so good. Okay, you guys, I absolutely loved both of the characters. I absolutely loved him. He was like a dream, like, man. So very cute, very much enjoyed him as a character and learning about him and learning about like them trying to figure out this relationship after they've already met 7 years in the past, and trying to navigate from her living that past now and then being with him in the present timeline at the same time, you know? It's a weird concept, but Either way. And lastly, we have our mystery thriller genre to end off this video with. Let me just jump right into it. First book I'm going to start off with is The Housemade. If you guys have not heard of The Housemade by Frida McFadden, you are living under a rock, because this series has like taken everything by storm with how good it is. I absolutely love this series. I haven't read the last book yet, but I am planning on it very soon. But absolutely loved it. I highly recommend that you read it. It's such a fast-paced, interesting thriller mystery read, because it's kind of like twisted and sadistic in some ways, and then like the ending and the plot twist gets you, like you're just like, oh my god, like you get one of the plot, like there's multiple plot twists at the end and you probably guess one of them, but there's multiple, and let me tell you, you don't guess it, okay? You might not expect it. But either way, I absolutely love this book. So this first one follows, well, actually all of the books follow Millie. She is the main female character throughout all three of them. She is a housemaid. She is hired by Nina Winchester to, like I said, be like their housemaid, work in the house and stuff like that. And this family just like isn't what they seem to be after the initial interview. So she meets them, and then the next thing she knows, they have completely done a 180 in who they are as people. And she's like, what the heck is going on? And then like the biggest kicker that you find out right at the beginning, well, it's also on the back of the book, the lock on the bedroom door is on the outside. And she's just like, what have I done? Like it's crazy. It's super fun, super fast paced, super interesting. I highly recommend that you read this series. And I've heard her other books are also really amazing. I have not personally read any of them. I would like to though. I highly recommend anything by her because I heard they're all very, very good. Another author that I absolutely love, or just this book in general, this is actually another 5-star read of mine, is Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. This is definitely more of a mystery than a thriller, and I absolutely love it. When I tell you, like, I was just like, wow, okay, like, it just like kept me on the edge of my seat, and the point of views that you follow to get the story is so interesting because you're like, huh, okay, like weird. So basically what happens is that in this neighborhood, a woman goes missing, and then about a week or two later, another mother and her child end up going missing. And then 10 years later, the child comes back and everybody wants to know like what happened, because basically these mysteries have never been solved. None of these people have been found other than the fact that this girl just mysteriously came back. It is so good. It keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. I have read another one of her books and I didn't love it. It just like did not live up to this book at all. I feel like that one was such a letdown compared to this book, but I do recommend giving her other stuff a try as well. Like I said, I've only read one other book by this author, but the way that she writes, lays out the story is really good. I think that she does that well within all of her books. All right, we only got 2 books left. Next up is another book I physically don't own, and that is If We Were Villains by ML Rio. This book, oh my god, this was a 5-star read for me. The thing with this book is that this is a dark academia. I would also classify this in the like mystery-ish genre as well. The thing with this book is that I fully understand this is not a book everybody is going to like. You have to be a particular type of person, I think, to really understand and love this book for what it is. And I totally understand that. So like with me recommending you this book, just think about that. I also know that this is not a book I would recommend to everybody, but I would absolutely love for you, if you're interested in dark academia, to read it. I feel like this is a good one to do because this one, in a sense, to me, makes more sense as dark academia than other books that I have read in the past, or one other book that I read that was dark academia. I don't want to say it's easy to follow, but in a sense it is. This book follows a group of, I think it's 7 students who all go to this really prestigious art school where they all study theater. The book takes place in their 4th year at this school, and all they do is focus on Shakespeare. They do Shakespeare theater, that is it, that's their main focus, and they're all basically obsessed with Shakespeare. And that is like a big thing to remember. So a lot of Shakespeare talks happens in this book, a lot of references to Shakespeare, and they also talk in Shakespearean dialogue a lot to each other. So if you don't understand it or you don't know what any of it means, that's going to trip you up and make you really confused probably. So just remember that. So either look it up if you're interested in reading this one, or if you kind of already know it, then like maybe this is something that you'll enjoy type of thing. So that's something to remember. And their 4th year focuses on tragedy. You're following 7 of these students, and then one night, one of them turns up dead. You're basically following the mystery of like what really happened to this person and how everything came to be the way it did. Following following Oliver, who is just released from prison for this crime. And throughout the entire book, you don't know if Oliver actually committed the crime or not. So that's the thing to remember. It is said on the back of the book, so none of that is a spoiler, by the way. I'm just really bad at like recalling the books and telling you things in the right order. I think that this is a good Dark Academia book to get you to see if you even like Dark Academia, because it's not for everybody. It's really not. And I feel like this one is very low on the Dark Academia scale compared to some other ones and some other weird things that go on within Dark Academia. Just keep that in mind if you're someone who might be into that or is like trying to get into that genre, because I will tell you, it is very hard to read and understand and or just consume as a person, because it sits heavily on you, just like this book sat heavily on me. So love that. And the last book that I have for this video, for this recommendations, I literally cannot believe I've been filming for this long, is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I love Lisa Jewell. I think Lisa Jewell is a great mystery thriller author. She writes things so well. Oh my gosh, things like everything is very eerie and very mysterious, and you're kind of like really left on the edge of your seat the entire time. Like you're really invested in what's going on in her stories. I think that's like what makes her such a great mystery author. I wouldn't call her stuff a thriller at all. It's definitely very much mystery, and I love that about her. Okay, it's kind of like really dark, disturbing, eerie mystery. Nothing like extremely disturbing happens within the books. Basically, None of This Is True follows two women, and this is basically it's kind of following a now and then timeline being told through a Netflix documentary almost. You're reading the story as well as like you're reading like a past timeline of things that have already happened, and then the future of like after these things have been uncovered within that Netflix documentary. But basically one of the main women, Alex, she has a podcast where she interviews really like successful women. And then our other character, Josie, she is like, I have a story for you and I think you should let me come on your podcast. Basically, Josie like weasels her way into Alex's life, and Alex is so far invested in her story because her story hasn't ended yet, compared to the other women who have been on this podcast already. Her story hasn't ended yet, so Alex is really invested in her life and her story and wanting to find out what else she has to tell her. It just turns into this like really dark, eerie, twisted story. And it was really fun, really entertaining. I will say my biggest pet peeve with this book is the ending. The ending is like weirdly wrapped up in a way that's like not conclusive, where it's like, okay, where I feel like her other books have been like wrapped up conclusively as to like what happens. I actually recommend everything by her. I think she's amazing. There's only one book by her that I genuinely just like kind of felt meh about. I think that she's one of my go-to authors that I will always like, she comes out with a book, I'm gonna buy it, you know what I mean? Like I absolutely love it, and I can't believe it took me so long to read this book because I think this came out last year and I can't believe I just read it, and it's crazy. So I absolutely loved it. I think this is an absolute must to be put on your TBR for this fall, and any of her books actually to be put on her TBR. But anyways, that is it for this video. These are all the books that I'm recommending you guys to read this fall. I hope you read them. I really like them, and I think you'll all have a really good time reading them as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow me on all of my social medias as well as subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.